Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a viral argument that claims to have uncovered the common thread that connects a bunch of recent acts of political violence. A video from the channel Liberal Hive Mind is basically saying, hey, there's a pattern here, and almost everyone is missing it. So let's break down their case. And this, right here, is the core claim. The entire video is built around this single idea. The creator sets out to prove that, despite what you might hear in other places, the one thing that really links all these violent incidences is, from their point of view, left-wing politics. So how do they even start to build this case? Well, it all begins by setting up what you could call a counter-narrative. The stated goal is to present a clear macro point that directly challenges studies and reports that attribute most political extremism to the right. And that's where this whole common thread idea comes into play. The video basically frames its entire analysis as a kind of investigation, a search for this thread. It suggests that a bunch of news stories you probably saw as totally separate events, well, they're actually all part of one singular unfolding trend. Okay, so the very first piece of evidence they put on the table is a clip from Joe Rogan. The source uses this to suggest that, hey, it's not just them saying this. Other big voices are supposedly starting to see the exact same pattern that they're about to lay out for us. So what's the deal with this clip? Really, it's used as a launching pad. It's the springboard for the bigger idea that these major events aren't just happening by chance. The video wants you to start thinking that maybe, just maybe, they're happening by design. And this quote? This is the pivot point. The source uses it to introduce a core belief for its whole argument. In politics, there are no coincidences, only clearly identifiable trends. This really sets the stage and gets you in the right mindset for the specific examples they're about to show us. So once that framework is in place, the video gets right into its first case study. This one is all about a TikToker who very publicly identified as Antifa, and, you guessed it, was later arrested by the feds. The video lays out a pretty clear timeline for this guy, Kyle. The points it really hammers home are his direct calls for people to grab guns and take action, and of course, his very open self-identification with Antifa, right down to the sweatshirt he had on when he was arrested. For the source, this is presented as a rock-solid proof of his political motivations. And here is where the video connects the dots. The argument is that this guy's actions are not happening in a vacuum. Nope. The claim is that his radicalization is a direct result of politicians constantly talking about a threat to democracy. All right, next up in this alleged pattern is an incident involving a man from Maryland who was arrested for supposedly targeting a former Trump administration official. The video makes a specific connection here to that big conservative policy initiative, Project 2025. So, with this arrest, the video presents what it sees as another open and shut case of politically motivated violence. It's drawing a straight line from the suspect's alleged intentions right to a major conservative policy plan. The source video really zooms in on these specific details. It makes sure to highlight who the alleged target was, the stated motive, which was Project 2025, and then, of course, the really disturbing internet search history. Each one of these details is used to build the case that this wasn't random, but a calculated political threat. And here we go again. Video draws another direct line, this time from this alleged plot straight to the words of a major political figure. The argument being made is that when you label something like Project 2025 a fascist playbook, that rhetoric directly inspires this kind of alleged violence. So, for the final case study, we head over to Portland. In this instance, the source connects a police shooting to what it describes as a much broader pattern of threats against former President Trump and other Republican officials. In this Portland story, the key details the video focuses on are the suspect's weapon and the threatening messages found written on it. The source doesn't present these threats against President Trump as just some isolated act. Instead, it's framed as evidence of a dangerous copycat effect, inspired by what it sees as a hostile political climate. And from this one incident, the video then zooms out to make a much broader claim. It uses this single event to paint a picture of the entire region, arguing that in that part of the country, threats from left-wing individuals are just a regular thing. Okay, so after laying out these three case studies, you've got the TikToker, the alleged Maryland plot, and the Portland shooting, the video finally moves to its grand conclusion. It's ready to tie everything together and reveal that common thread it promised us at the very beginning. This is actually a really fascinating way to boil down the video's whole argument. It completely reframes the narrative. The suggestion here is that the problem isn't a specific political figure, but what the source calls the extreme reaction to that figure from the other side of the aisle. And so the video wraps up by laying out this exact chain of events. This, it claims, is the common thread. It's a simple three-step process. First comes the political rhetoric, which then leads to individuals feeling emboldened, and that finally results in violent action. And this quote right here, this is the final crystal clear takeaway for the viewer. The video concludes that when you trace what it calls political terrorism all the way back to its source, the path always seems to lead right to the Democratic Party and its rhetoric. So all of this leaves us with a final question to think about. It's not really about whether the video's claims are right or wrong, but it's about the very storytelling technique that's being used. When you take completely separate, disconnected events and weave them together into a single common thread, how does that actually change the way we understand each of those events individually? What's the real power of creating a pattern like that?